Hey y'all, it is great to be here tonight at Geraldine First United Methodist Church, and I'm super excited about it. This used to be our home church before my husband became a pastor over at Valleyhead and at Mentone. So once again, it is just wonderful to be here in my own hometown. So I have provided y'all with a copy of your Safe Sanctuaries policy in case you would prefer to follow along that way. And I also have copies of the slideshow that I will have up. So whatever is easiest for you is how you can follow along and make notes. And if you have any questions, you can either raise your hand as we go or hold them till the end, whatever works for you. So I always have to jot them down if I'm gonna save my questions till the end, which that's just the way my brain works. But anyway, Safe Sanctuaries training. So who can tell me why we do Safe Sanctuaries training and what is Safe Sanctuaries training? Well, Safe Sanctuaries training is a set of policies and procedures for protecting the most vulnerable among us. And today we're going to be talking the most vulnerable being our children. It is also protection for our volunteers, our staff, and our ministry. An important way of communicating that our churches are safe and welcoming to the most vulnerable, whoever they may be. Whether they already are a churchgoer or whether they are the new family that has moved into town that wants to be able to bring their children here. But having said what Safe Sanctuaries is, I also want to tell you what it is not. It is not a barrier to ministry. What would be a barrier to ministry is if people do not feel safe coming to your church. So it is not meant to be a barrier to ministry at all. It is not one size fits all. Smaller churches might be able to do the training online. Larger churches, that is where I come in, because I have worked with your Safe Sanctuaries chair and the team, and we have gone through and looked forward into your goals and seen where you want your ministry to grow so that we can plan accordingly as we move on into the future. Security, first aid, health, and safety training are not part of Safe Sanctuaries. Safe Sanctuaries is only about keeping the vulnerable safe. And it is not just for bigger churches. It is for every United Methodist church out there. So anyway, back to your church, Geraldine First Methodist. Y'all are seeking to create a safe environment where opportunities for abuse are minimized for the children and the youth that do come here. And you're going to do that through the initial and regular training that you need to have with the people that are working with the children and the youth. Y'all are a sacred place where people of all ages, backgrounds, experiences, study, worship, fellowship, y'all all come together to make this church the church that it is. And y'all also exist, and I know this from having been here, that y'all want to be the Jesus that someone sees every day. And y'all exist to bring each new person into Geraldine First United Methodist Church. When is the policy in effect? Because you could know all about the policy, but if you don't know when it is in effect, then you don't know when you need to be watching out to make sure that there's no gaps in the policy. It is in effect during events when Geraldine First United Methodist provides direct care for children and youth. And that would be from the time that the children are checked in to Geraldine First United Methodist Church care until they are checked out by a parent, a legal guardian, or another authorized person. So if you haven't checked the children in, then they're not under the care. And if you've already checked them out, then they're not under the care. It's during that time that you have checked them in and you check them out that Geraldine First would be providing the care for the children. Now, y'all know that we have Celebrate Recovery here, and that's a big ministry, and they're here every single week. Celebrate Recovery is known as a third-party group. Basically, that is meaning an outside group that is working outside the church, but meets in your church. Now, if it's a church group or a non-church group that only uses the facilities here one time or for short duration, then they might ask y'all to provide the child care for them to make sure that the child care that is provided by the care providers is within compliance of the Safe Sanctuaries and background check criteria. Some examples would be like if somebody is here for a conference, a non-church function such as a baby shower, a funeral, etc. Now, there are the groups like Celebrate Recovery that I already mentioned that do meet here regularly. And both groups are required to follow the policy. The difference would be that with Celebrate Recovery, when y'all have training, then that training experience and opportunity is also shared with the people, the volunteers that would be with them, and all of the churches that come together to support Celebrate Recovery. Y'all remember that there's 5 of them, so that's a lot of people that can come into Geraldine in support of a third-party outside group such as Celebrate Recovery. One of the things I'll cover in more detail later is the quick train. So y'all know that I'm up here at least once a year, but just in case somebody new comes in and wants to volunteer, the opportunity for a quick train is there, just like it is there for people within your own church. If you have a new family come in and they would like to be able to work within your church. The regularly scheduled third parties will work with the church's Safe Sanctuary chair, Mr. Kent, and he will make sure that all of the adult participants that care for their children must participate in the Safe Sanctuaries training prior to providing the care. The Safe Sanctuaries training will be provided not less frequently than, meaning at least within a year's time. The training is good for 3 years, although you would want to have your training done within the 3-year mark. As new adults join the program, the third-party group must provide verification that they have had the training and a background check prior to being able to provide care for children, and the verification must be signed by each participating adult as well as a representative of the group, whether it is Celebrate Recovery or if we are also utilized by another regularly scheduled group. They will also be able to maintain their files, their background checks, any interviews that they conduct, applicants' paperwork. They will be able to maintain that inside the church office because they meet here regularly. And it will be in a confidential file, and it will be locked up. That group, whichever group it may be, will be able to access their own files, but it will also be available to Mr. Kent, the church's Safe Sanctuary chair. Now, on the occasion that they might not have care providers of their own, either through lack of volunteers or they haven't been able to hire someone, they are able to ask Geraldine's care providers if they would like to be able to provide care for children and youth during the time that Celebrate Recovery meets. If the care providers are asked, and if they decide to provide care during the regular events, let's say, for example, Celebrate Recovery, the third party, Celebrate Recovery, will provide a by-name list of all of the care providers to the church Safe Sanctuary chair, and they will verify in writing that during their event, these care providers are considered third-party staff or volunteers and not the churches. That way there's a direct line of church versus third party, even if we have people that are qualified and willing to volunteer or to work for both. Now, why do we do Safe Sanctuaries training? It is because we have a scriptural foundation. Jesus taught that children were to be included and provided within the community of faith. So the church's goal is to be a place where children find the unconditional love and care that they need to grow and thrive. And as y'all read, and as you can see, there are verses that go with that. Why Safe Sanctuaries? Also our commitment in baptism. Whenever you have reaffirmed your baptismal vows or attended a baptism, what do you say? Will you nurture these children in Christ's holy church, that by your teaching and example, they may be guided to accept God's grace for themselves, to profess their faith openly, and to lead a Christian life? Yes, we will. Or yes, I do. Also, our task, and how is it that we even came to get into the Safe Sanctuaries business in the first place? And it's not just because of what you saw on the news. Our task was given to us by the 1996 General Conference mandate. And they approved a resolution that called upon local churches and annual conferences to institute the policies and procedures to reduce the risk of child sexual abuse and other abuses in our churches. We also have Alabama law that requires us to, and legal exposure. And not that we should do anything because of the legal exposure, but we also, during this crazy time, don't want to bring any unnecessary scrutiny upon any of our churches. But the biggest reason is because we want to keep the widows and the orphans, who Jesus has asked us and mandated himself that we keep them safe. That is who we want to keep safe. That is why we have safe sanctuaries. So, as you see, the types of abuse are physical, sexual, emotional, ritual, and neglect. Safe Sanctuaries is intended to protect against all of these. Now, I did add a couple of extra slides up here that you will see. They are not actually in the policy as far as the statistics, because this is what the board had to approve. But just to let you know how serious this is and why we need to be extra vigilant when we are caring for the children. Parents are the most common perpetrators. 84% of perpetrators had some parental involvement. 13% were others known to the child, ranging from friends and neighbors to other relatives to unmarried partners of parents. And as you look at the demographics, you will also see that by age, the children under 1 year of age are astronomically more likely to be abused than any other age group. The ones who cannot speak out for themselves. Also, as you see, the demographics of Alabama victims, again, in 2019, that girls are more likely to be abused than boys, or than the unknown. Now, I have provided quite a few definitions for you, and that is because those are definitions that we will run into as we continue to go through the policy. But the ones that I really wanted to hit on were child, youth, minor. Those are often interchangeable and can be interchangeable. But I also made the recommendation that because you have youth that here at Geraldine are older, middle school, and then you have the children that would be in the nursery or up to like 4th grade, I think y'all might still do, that for the purposes of a safe sanctuary policy, you might want to go on and differentiate what's a youth and what's a child. Authorized person, because y'all have that here at Geraldine, an authorized person is a person that the parents or a legal guardian authorize to sign in and out their child or children from the care of the church. A volunteer is someone who's not employed by the church. An employee is someone who is employed by the church. And a leader is a person who is in charge or responsible for a group of minors, whether or not they are paid staff or an employee or a volunteer. And also, I see several of you here that are part of the Staff Parish Relations Committee. That's basically, for those of y'all who are new, is the church's hiring authority. I already gave y'all the list of abuses that are out there. And here I have included the statute that goes along with them that gives you the legal definition and where to find it in the Alabama Code. Neglect is also abuse. I think we sometimes think of abuse as hitting or starving or not giving a child what they need, but the neglectfulness, not having the food, not having a jacket can also be neglect. So anyway, moving on to the meat of it all, and I hope that helped y'all get a better understanding of what we're looking at and why we're looking at it. The screening procedures for volunteers and the paid staff working with children and youth. Now, right now, I understand that you don't have any paid staff. Y'all are lucky and you have volunteers that are willing to give their time. And I love that about this church, that people are willing to step up and help when it is needed. But for the Safe Sanctuaries policy, the training is typically specific to children and youth leaders, not for all staff or volunteers in the church, but because so many of y'all volunteer your time on different committees or at different functions, whether it's the Easter egg hunt or whether it's the trunk or treat. If any of y'all are going to be around minors at any time, either because you want to help at a specific function or because of your job duties, like security, that you might need to be around children, then you would still need to take the Safe Sanctuaries training, and you would also need to do the background check. The training and background check documentation will be kept in a confidential file in the church office. Now, the leadership requirements that we have here at Geraldine, and not just for those of you that are already or volunteering, but if any of y'all want to volunteer in another capacity, especially one that works with children as a care provider, you will be given a written job description and the expectations so that you have that to know what you are going to be doing. If you're not here or have not been here active in the church for 6 months, unless you have been waived by the SPRC, then you will have to wait to be able to volunteer. And that's called the 6-month rule. And the 6-month rule basically says that you must have been attending weekly worship or church-wide events at least twice per month over a 6-month period. And that is so that people here at the church get to know you and get to see you, not only here at the church, but hopefully out in the community as well, but definitely here at the church, where you would be a care provider for possibly their children, their grandchildren, their nieces, or their nephews. Also, applicants will need to fill out an application and personal information piece of paper that will be completed and signed by the applicant. Just like your normal old job application, it will include, at a minimum, many of the same things you're used to on an application. It will have your legal name and address, your birthday, your phone number, an emergency contact person. And as needed, as decided by the SPRC, you might also need to take a drug test, provide work-related references, provide the church membership, how many years you went there, and a number for your previous pastor, and why you would like to have that position. You will also be signing a consent form, and you will complete it, and it will be signed by all people over the age of 19. And it will authorize the church to obtain a criminal background check, a sex offender registry check, and, as I said, at the discretion of the SPRC, a possible drug or alcohol screen. And you will also be consenting for them to collect details necessary for completion of the background check. Now, persons 18 and younger, if that is your age, while you're filling out the application, you are not required to complete a background check. But you are required to have, prior to serving, your parent or legal guardian sign a statement saying that they know of no reasons why you would not be able to be around children, around minors, directly or indirectly. And you will not, if you were 18 or younger, be allowed to supervise children without adult constant supervision. Now, the SBRC, once you have filled out this application, will be responsible for conducting the interviews, and they will also maintain copies of any notes that they take while doing these interviews. And again, also kept in the magic confidential file in the church office. References, if needed, will also be checked. Also, say it with me, in the confidential file in the church office. And your files, when I say they're confidential, are only going to be able to be accessed by the Safe Sanctuary Chair, the SBRC, and or the pastor. You will also be given a policy that you already have, and you will need to sign saying that you have read it and that you understand it. And if you have any questions that you ask about it. So today, if you've read through it already, would be a great time to ask those questions. Moving right along. Background checks. So anyway, there are a lot of factors that go into the background check. And that is Mr. Kent's area of expertise, being the Safe Sanctuaries Chair. But you will have paperwork to fill out. You will give it to Mr. Kent, and then he will get it submitted for you. They must be renewed every 3 years. But I want to reiterate that it is not less frequently than every 3 years, which means that it is only good for 3 years from the date that it became effective. So if you have to wait on them to do a background check and you waited until the day that you know that the church got the last one approved, then you will have some time that you would not be able to work as a care provider. So it is always good when you think it might be time to ask Mr. Kent or your Safe Sanctuaries chair, when do I need to fill it out again? What they will be looking for on the background check is a Social Security trace, a state of Alabama criminal check, a national, also called multi-jurisdictional criminal check, and provided that a sex offender registry check is included individually or as a component of one of these other checks, then you're good. If it is not, then they will also run a sex offender registry check. And if you think you might want to or need to, depending upon the age of the children that you are wanting to work with, if you think that you might ever need to drive, then you will also need to have a DMV check as well. And that does not matter if it's a church van that we might get in the future, if it's a personal car, a rented car, or a borrowed car. And as well, there might be other requirements from the church that they want. And the clergy that are out here from the different churches that have come in, you must complete a new background check through the local church, not just the one that you did complete for the conference. Now, being a pastor, if you move from district to district or conference to conference, that one will transfer. But the one that you would need for your local church, wherever you go, would still need to be redone. Other training for volunteers and staff. You're here doing it, and I applaud you. It would be the Safe Sanctuaries training and the background check prior to serving. And you should complete the refresher training led by myself or another district trainer, and that again would be at least every 3 years, meaning less than the 3-year mark, or as we like to say, not less frequently than every 3 years. And that also includes if there's been a change to the church policy, then you would need to redo the Safe Sanctuaries training within 6 months of a policy change to make sure that everybody is on the same page when it comes to watching over the kids and keeping them as safe as we can. At least once per year, or not less frequently than once per year, I will be here. Now, that would be for anybody who did not go through their training the year before. Does not mean that if you're here tonight and when I'm here next year that you have to take it again. It just means that I will be here because hopefully the church will continue to grow and we will have new people that will need to be trained. And I also want to talk to you now about the quick trains that I mentioned earlier. The quick trains are offered to new volunteers or staff that they have to have the quick train and the background check as well. But the quick train is basically the training that we are doing here today with the policy, with the notes, with the slides that I'm leaving, that a staff member or volunteer at the church can take that material and who is not qualified as a trainer, but they can take the materials that I'm leaving here with you today, and as long as that person actually participated in the training, and they would be able to take those materials and train the new volunteer with those materials. And the new person that is being trained has to be required to participate in the next scheduled training. So let's say that y'all are all being trained here today. In 2 months, y'all have somebody new come in. But Mr. Kent, being our Safe Sanctuaries chair, can take the materials that y'all have, and since he attended the training today, he can take the materials, train them, get them signed up so that they can go on and make sure that they take the training the next time myself or another district trainer is here. Do the background check, because they would have had the training given by Mr. Kent, who is not a district trainer, but they will be back here to train when myself or somebody else comes. Then they would still be up to speed on the policy that the administrative board approved for y'all. So, any questions so far? Okay, great. So there's a couple of quick other things I want to go over that might be quick, but they're really important. 5-year rule. This means that leaders have to be at least 5 years older than the oldest member of the group that they will be working with. So if you have a 14-year-old, then you have to have somebody at least 19. If you have a 17-year-old, then you're going to have somebody that is 23. that right? 17, yes. Y'all check my math, Miss Francis. So, also the adult to child ratio, no more than 10 children or youth per adult, which means if you have 15 youth, you're going to need to have that a second adult in there. The minimum age of the leaders is 19, but if you have somebody who is 12 years old who wants to help out, they can, as long as they always have supervision and as long as they are at least 5 years older than the oldest child that is in the group that they would be working with. The allowed exceptions to this, to the 5-year rule, would be if you do hire somebody, then they only need to be 3 years older than the oldest person in the group that they would be supervising. And the 6-month rule, again, if you have hired somebody, because you don't want to hire somebody and say you have to wait 6 weeks and you have to come to church, you want them to go in and start working in that capacity, they do not have to meet the 6-month rule criteria. And y'all have already done a great job. Y'all have all the windows and the doors, so all of your children's rooms are already compliant, as you know, because Mr. Kent has already explained that one to you. If we were to add any other rooms, like the rooms down this hallway right here that we typically use for the adults, if we were to ever use those as children's rooms, those doors would have to either be swapped out for one that has a window in it, or the door would have to remain open at all times. And we don't lock the doors. No doors can be locked. We also have a 2-adult rule. For all you mamas and daddies who want to work together and you want to be in the room with your children, you can't do that. You cannot have spouses working together. I know. Means you get to take a break from each other. This is 2 non-related and non-cohabitating adults must always be present in groups of children, except in emergency situations or unless exceptions are in this policy. Least related adults. So if you are a second cousin, like Carol and I are second cousins, then we are least related enough that we could be in the room with our youth together, where Carol and her husband, Scott, could not be because they are spouse, and she and I would be the least related adults in that case. Another way to do it would be floaters. Now floaters, like if you had a floater standing right there at the T-junction in the hall, then they can see all the way down the hall that all of the children's rooms. They also can walk up and down the hall, have all of the doors to all of the rooms in their line of sight without having to turn a corner. And it also means that from the window that you'll have in the door, they have full access, viewing access to every point in that room. That is what a floater is for, so that if we don't have enough people on a certain day to be able to meet the 2-adult rule in a classroom, that the floater can act as a second person. And they're also able to help you clear a restroom if you need to have somebody else go check to make sure that a restroom is clear. If a teacher or a care provider stands in the doorway of the room, then the floater in line of sight of the care provider and the care provider in line of sight of the floater and the bathroom in line of sight of both of them, but the floater can peep and make sure that there's no one in that bathroom, and then that child can go to the bathroom. That is another great way that floaters are able to help. They'll see on the slides, I've gone into a little bit greater detail. Like the floaters can have no other responsibility except to be the floater. And they cannot have other rooms unless it's on that hallway where they have visibility, and they cannot be on a different floor. Overnight trips and events, adult chaperones must be the same gender as the children. So like if all of the girls go to Minton to go shopping, then you would need to have all women chaperones. If it's a youth group trip where you have boys and girls, then you would need to have both men and women chaperones. And always, always, always let the parent or legal guardian have all of the information about where you're going, the time you're going to be there, your phone number, the driver's phone number that they will be with, and any pertinent information like when you will be back, the place you will be staying if you're staying anywhere. Information exchange is important. Youth drivers can drive themselves to or from events, but they cannot drive from an event to the church or from the church to an event. And as you see, I have a little bit more detail in the policy as well as on your slides. Now, bathroom procedures. If you have the nursery, diaper changes have to be in an open area, open, visible area, which is why the changing table is where it is. Toddlers, supervise independence, because who wants to stop a 2-year-old from being able to do what they are so proud that they have learned to do? Children get express privacy because they are able to do that on their own unless they need help. And toilet-trained older children can go to the bathroom as a group, and the leader should make certain that there is nobody in the bathroom. Here, it's easy the way the bathroom is set up, and the leader can take all of the children with them, especially with the help of a floater or when you have multiple adults in the room. And active church members or attendees. Now, here's the fun thing, because so many of us are related here, myself included. Miss Linda says she has taught everybody, and I'm related to everybody, even though I grew up in Birmingham. Parents and legal guardians can sign saying that other adults can be their representative to sign their child or children in and to sign their child or children out of church events. And remember, the church provides care only when a child has been signed in until the point that they are signed out. So, if it's before the child is signed in, then your authorized person, the legal guardian or the parent, is responsible for the child. Same as if they've already signed out. And for Sunday school, we do announcements, and a lot of times the children will go straight down there with the Sunday school teacher, the Sunday school care provider. That is fine, but we need to have the sign-in sheet in here so that the children can be signed in up here so that they can leave with their perspectives or Sunday school teacher to go to their rooms. And after Sunday school, because they get out at different times, usually about the same time, but sometimes you get a minute or two difference, they are allowed to go with Sunday school teachers up the stairs to the sanctuary, but they must be with the Sunday school teacher and be signed out by their parent, so that we are still sticking with they are signed in and they are signed out. They don't just get to go to the sanctuary, see their parents, and run over to them. We need the parents to come over and finish signing out the paperwork. And this is, I know it seems like, really? We but we need to keep up with this, because it's not just about the safety of the children coming from downstairs to the sanctuary. It is also, if we were to have a fire drill or any emergency and we needed to run out, well, some of the classrooms might be closer to that door, some of the classrooms might be this door, and that way we have lists for each class who is signed in and who we need to be looking for. Not just, well, I think I saw them at church, but I don't know if they've already left or not. So, and if somebody has not been coming to church regularly, or they are new, and they've not been here the 6 months, part of the 6-month rule, then they are not eligible to use an authorized adult, as I've described and with greater detail on your paper and on the slides. Third-party groups like Celebrate Recovery also cannot use an authorized person, which does make it easier for any care providers from the church that do want to possibly accept an invitation, if there is one, to work with a third-party group. And the reason behind that is because if somebody's been here 6 months, you're going to know who they are, and you're going to know like who you're related to and who's your nieces and your nephews and your cousins. You're not going to have that when we have people coming in from outside of the church or from different communities, like they might as part of an outside third-party group, or if they are new to church, or if they've not been here in a while, they would be unfamiliar faces to people that have been coming that might still be new to the community themselves. And back to the transportation and overnight, everybody that would drive, besides having had the DMV check, also needs to be qualified as a leader, which means they will have had the Safe Sanctuaries training, ta-da, and background check, and signed all the papers and documentation that they need to for that as well. And if they're going to be traveling overnight or just on a day trip, then there will need to be a liability form. And if you're a driver and you are using your own vehicle, you will also need to have proof of updated insurance with you as well, and a valid driver's license on you. And whether you are in the church van, a borrowed vehicle, your own vehicle, you would still need to follow the 2-adult rule. You can caravan with 1 adult as long as all vehicles leave the same point and arrive at the next point together, always in line of sight of each other. So if one vehicle stops for gas, everybody stops for gas. That's the only way you can caravan without having 2 adults in the vehicle. And the children and the youth must have the permission slip signed. That is one way of making sure that the parents or legal guardians or authorized people know that where their child's going to be, what they're going to be doing, who they're going to be with, when they're expected to be there, and when they're expected to be back. And Parents also need the information for the trip leader. And if an event is held solely here, let's say Easter egg hunt. The event is here, but we have some of the teens wanting to help. They can drive here as youth. Otherwise, we're not gonna let the youth drive to and from Mentone if that's where they're going. It's only to and from the church that they can drive. Youth driving, something that we want to stay away from. If the church does choose to finish, allowing this, then it needs to be on an event by event basis with assigned permission. And whereas the authorized adult permission is good for a whole year, this is too, but it really needs to be on an event by event basis. And with siblings, other youth would not be allowed to drive in the car because the parents are the ones who can say that the younger brother can drive or ride with the older sister. And that is a parental decision at that time. But again, it is only to or from the church if an event is solely at the church. Everyone needs to wear seat belts, and no one under 85 magical pounds can ride in the front seat. All consent forms would be for a 1-year basis, with the exceptions that we've talked about, that you see with the slides, and that you have in 2 different formats in front of you. And again, chaperones must be the same gender as the children that they are providing care for. And if it is an overnight function, adults cannot be in a room alone. Even a single adult, a single parent, cannot be in a room alone with their own child. And that is for the child's safety. And it goes back to the fact that most perpetrators are parents of children. And adults also will not share a bed with any child, including their own child. And in a large room with multiple beds, 2 same gender adults can sleep in the same room, but not in the same bed with youth or children. Reporting procedures. So if we suspect that something has happened, what do? Well, first of all, if you think that a child has suffered any of the types of abuses that are listed at the top and that you have read about in the definitions and with the code there, then we advocate for voluntary reporting. And you will not be held liable because you want to do the right thing and make a voluntary report. Now, under Alabama law, mandatory reporters are going to be your K through 12 school teachers and employees, daycare workers and employees, mental health professionals, and clergy. Now, I must say that nothing in the conference or the church is meant to make a pastor violate the confidentiality during counseling. So I'm telling you now that if you let any pastor know while you were in counseling of any abuse, then they can choose to report it. And they are encouraged to report it even if it is found out in the confidentiality of a counseling session. Doesn't mean that they will, but they are highly encouraged to. And that is why the pastors do try to alert people to the fact that it is confidential, but I still could report you. So if that's what you're here to talk to me about, then it's up to you if you decide to or not. Being mindful of the nature of child abuse reporting, training and consultation is available to both clergy and lay people to prepare them for a faithful response, because we need to remember to always keep our eyes on God and what He would want. The important thing is that the individual who observes or suspects that there is abuse is responsible for making their report to law enforcement and the County Department of Human Resources. So if you see something or think you see something or hear something, it is up to you to report it, because you would be the one that would have the first-hand knowledge of it. Immediate notification of the report must also be made to the pastor, the SPRC chair, and the volunteer or staff member's supervisor. Do not discuss this with anyone else. We are not part of the gossip mill. This is really, really serious, and we hope that it never ever comes to that. But just have compassion for the child, and we only notify who we have to, and the authorities at Department of Human Resources, the police, and the pastor and SPRC know what they need to do. If pastor or in a larger church is implicated, don't tell that person. That is when you let the SPRC chair know, and then you also still notify law enforcement and the County Department of Human Resources. And SPRC chair will be the one to let the district superintendent know. Now, back to response. A quick, compassionate, and unified response is what is needed. All allegations will be taken seriously, and church volunteers and personnel are not to undertake an investigation on their own. Let the authorities do their job. We need to stay out of the way of the people that know how to do things in the proper order, in the proper way. In addition to, once again, not talking about it and not spreading the rumor mill. The district superintendent or his representative are the only ones that can make a statement to the press or to any representative of any media source. All requests for statements should be directed to the Director of Communication in a spirit of cooperation in helping the media find out who they need to talk to is important. You don't need to talk to the media except to say, it would be our district superintendent, this is his name, and this is how you get in touch with him. In our case, he's at the Gadsden office, Mountain Lakes District. If the allegation concerns any person or activities outside of a relationship with the church event, then it is still the responsibility of the staff person who thinks that in charge of the activity to follow the reporting procedures that we talked about with the law enforcement and the Department of Human Resources. If the allegation is made against the church member or staff member or at the church, still follow the procedures in Chapter 5, or Section 5, that you have in the policy in front of you that has already been approved by the administrative board. And the revision of the policy. The policy is going to be reviewed every 3 years. And the reason they do that is because since we expect to not have changes, but we just want to make sure that with the potential for growth and with us already seeing new faces, new classes, new youth functions, that we want to make sure that we are on top of keeping the kids safe, and that we are looking again at the goals that we have for growth for the church. It also would let us reevaluate, do we have any vulnerable adults at that time that we would need to put into the policy? Again, if there's a change in the church policy, then we have 6 months to have another class with an update. And Safe Sanctuary chair or team is always able to review the policy with the administrative board and to request changes. And it is your administrative board, many of which y'all are on. Thank you for serving. And as y'all know, it is y'all's privilege to go through and to actually read it line by line and to approve the policy and any future revisions. Now, a lot of information. That's why I tried to get it to you ahead of time so that hopefully you did have the time to look over both the policy and the slides, so that if you had any questions, you've already jotted them down. Hopefully I answered them as I spoke to y'all, but if not, this would be the time for questions. And or if it's more helpful, then you can give me a call or a text. You can also get hold of Mr. Kent as Safe Sanctuary chair, and if he doesn't know the answer, because I've given him a lot of different paperwork that has to do like with background checks, but if he doesn't know the answer, then he can always get hold of me as well. So, but I think all of y'all still have my number from being in the directory. Okay. Good. Guess that means y'all are all happy. I answered all the questions. So, okay. Well, thank you for the time that I have had with y'all today. It has been good being able to see familiar faces and to be back here in my old stomping grounds and at a church that I'm blessed to come to with Celebrate Recovery. So, thank y'all, and look forward to seeing you again. And I'll get this.